Hello, and welcome to the Mr. GFX 50S YouTube channel. No, wait, sorry. Welcome to the Mr. 50mm YouTube channel. I'm Chris. Hello. For this video, we are going to talk about this camera, the FujiFilm GFX 50S. And no, this is not a review. I already did that. We're going to talk about a couple things, though. Namely, that this camera, if you weren't aware, does not allow for USB charging. There is a micro USB port, the super speed one, but that does not charge the camera. And I found that annoying. And I found there is a kind of solution to this, which we'll get into. Next, I do want to talk about the GFX and the fact that I now have a actual native GFX lens, and it's a Fujifilm one. It's not one of the native manual focus ones, although I also have one of those. And I just wanted to briefly discuss, now that I have a native GFX lens, am I done with adapting other lenses? With that, let's get into it. Some of you may know that I've been on a bit of a crusade of sorts to try to move away from using dedicated battery chargers for my cameras. So whenever I can, I try to either get a battery with the USB-C port in it, or try to get an adapter, a battery charger that plugs into a USB port, C or micro. I would prefer C, but I settle with micro since some batteries they are, I guess, older, and manufacturers do not want to move them to the USB-C or their chargers. So there are some chargers that I have that I've reluctantly accepted are just going to be micro USB plugs. Now, the GFX 50, wow, saying that is hard. GFX 50S uses a kind of unique battery. The Fujifilm NP-T125. It is not used on a lot of Fujifilm cameras. As a result, manufacturers, I think, just haven't really gotten on board with creating a version of this battery that supports USB-C charging, which is fair enough, since their cameras now do use other batteries, and all of the cameras now also support in-body USB-C charging for the newer cameras. But I don't have one of those. I have one of these older 50Ss, and since there are no third-party batteries that support USB-C charging directly on them, I do actually have a USB-C enabled charger that does work, and it is a third-party one. And if you are interested in that, I will put a link to that online. However, I did recently learn that the GFX 50S has one of these. It is a barrel plug. I think you can make that out. And it is a 15-volt DC in, which is fine and dandy. Normally, that's what you'd probably plug into for a studio shoot. Just jam it in there. You don't need to worry about your battery running out. However, reading the Fujifilm documentation, I learned that when you plug the camera in to this barrel jack, or plug a barrel jack into the barrel plug into the jack, anyways, when you plug your cable in, it will also charge your battery while powering it, which is pretty neat. And that got me thinking, is there any way that I can finagle a cable to get it to work so that I can use a chunky power bank like this one to power this thing? And it turns out, yes. And I didn't even really need to finagle anything. It was already a pretty widely available cable that I found on Amazon and AliExpress, and they're very cheap. And it's basically this thing. See, what this actually is, I gotta hold it up. I know it just looks like a cable with a box and a button on it, but it does something interesting. It takes advantage of the USB-C power delivery protocol, and it has what I believe is a USB-C power delivery, uh, basically the IC in there that negotiates voltages with the power supply. That was bad cadence. At any rate, what you basically get is you plug it into your USB-C port and you can scroll through different voltages. And for this one, it will only scroll through the voltages that your battery is able to output. So if your battery can't go up to 20 volts, it won't show you 20 volts. That being said, the camera needs 15. So you don't want to give it 20, which is a bit concerning because 20 is just one button push away. So it's something to keep in mind. However, take a look. I have my thing is set to 15 volts. And I'm going to plug it into this GFX. I will do that, pull that, and give it a plug. And we should now be getting 15 volts, and we are. And here's the thing. If I turn the camera on, you can now see this. You might see it in the corner. It's there, I think. Yes, it is there. It shows that it's plugged into wall power, and the battery is also, I believe that symbol demonstrates it's being juiced. Now, if I turn the camera off, you'll also get this little green light, which I believe is also the indication for battery charging. So that's very neat. And sure enough, just a second ago, this was missing a bar, and it is full now. I didn't do that much shooting with it, but overall, I think it's pretty neat. And it's a neat trick of USB-C power delivery since it can go through several voltages. I believe the main ones are 5, 9, 12, 15, and 20 for your standard range. Now, the cable that I bought was fairly cheap, and in theory, it says that it should be able to support 60 watts of power through the cheap cable. I don't know about that, but the GFX, I don't think needs 60 watts. I think we'll be generally fine. But I just wanted to share the solution since I think it's fairly neat, and it does work with power bricks as well. If I plug this brick in, it is just a generic cheap one that I got. It supports voltages from 5, 9, 12, 15, and 20. I should be able to scroll through these and use it to charge my GFX. And it effectively means that I can use a USB power bank or USB-C port, given it can support 15 volts out to charge my camera, which I think is pretty neat. And it's just something else that gives me another option in the event that I want to travel with it and I don't want to carry the stock charger, or I don't want to carry a charger at all. I can just carry this cable thingy. Overall, cool stuff, and I just wanted to share that. I'll link to versions of this below. I bought this one on Amazon, but I did see cheaper options on AliExpress, and they look like they're basically the same cable. So if you're interested, I'll just link to both of those again down there. Have a look if you will. Again, part of my crusade to stop carrying random proprietary charging bricks. Good stuff. Quick interjection here. I realized after I recorded that I forgot to mention what is the dimensions of the plug you need for the GFX 50S. So I had mentioned that, yes, you need a 15 volt output. That's exactly what it asks for on the inner camera flappy of the GFX 50S. I don't know if you can see it there. Hopefully you can. I believe I have it on that. Oh, maybe not. On the box. There we go. 15 volts. Right. But that does you no good if you don't know the dimensions of the fitty bits. So most of these cables, if you just buy the cable block and the block itself, have a output that is 5.5 by 2.1 millimeters metric times. But you need to convert that to 5.5 by 2.5, and that'll get you what you need to fit it in the hole on the GFX 50S. Now, I ended up buying this and this separately because at the time that I ordered it, I didn't know that they came with or there was a bundle option available that came with just multiple barrel jacks. And I'll link to those below as well. But you can buy just this and this adapter on its own. But for a couple bucks more, the bundle pack comes actually with a huge amount of barrel jacks for a bunch of other applications, because the original intent of this, it seems, was actually to provide a way to basically charge laptops with USB-C power, providing up to 60 watts of delivery. So if you are interested in using it for other things, I would encourage you to check out the pack with the multiple barrel jacks. Anyways, all right, back to the video. Okay, now that I've sampled from the Garden of Eden, or the Garden of FujiFilm, will I go back to adapting glass to my GFX 50S? Yes, yeah, it's fun. Now, I admit the 50 millimeter 3.5 that I got, it is a very, very good lens. It's a focal length that I do like on this camera. I don't mind that it's a f3.5. It's pretty light, and it was, I'm not going to say cheap, but it wasn't eye-wateringly expensive. And yeah, overall image quality on this lens is fantastic. And I do now basically have this lens jammed on the camera when I'm just going around and having a day with the camera. But that doesn't mean I'm just gonna stop adapting glass. Part of the fun that was using the GFX was trying to see what lenses adapt well to the slightly bigger sensor. And while the 50 millimeter 3.5 is technically very, very nice, and if you are a working pro or whatnot, this is probably the option to go, because the autofocus is, well, it's native to the system, so it's gonna be probably significantly better than, say, adapting Canon glass. And it is. I do notice a substantial boosty in reliability and speed when using the native glass. But remember, I'm not a photographer. I am a talking head kind of person on YouTube, and someone that just happens to like cameras, lenses, and shooting said camera or lenses. So for me, part of the fun of the system is just seeing what I can get away with when shooting the system. And it's also just kind of neat seeing how lenses that weren't meant to fit this larger frame work on said larger sensor and frame. It's interesting to see how the different distortions happen and see whether or not I can still lean into that and create a nice photo. And it's allowed me to try and kind of play with a bunch of lenses and explore mounting just weird stuff to it and seeing what I get. Like this here. This is the Voigtlander Septon, the actual one from actual Germany. This is the 50 f2. It's a very classic lens, and this is a film format lens. And to adapt it, I actually had to buy one of the decal to EF adapters and put that on GFX adapter. So it's adapters all the way down. Very neat. And overall, it does provide, well, this lens does actually cover the full image circle, which was a nice surprise. And it looks pretty cool, in my opinion. Probably not going to see any photos of it in this video, but trust me, I'll eventually get to a review of this, you'll see. But it's stuff like this that makes the GFX kind of fun for someone like me, who, again, isn't shooting professionally for cash monies for the photos specifically. Other things that were a lot of fun, again, to play with was shooting EF lenses on GFX. Obviously, another full frame system being used on more than full frame. And one of my favorite lenses to use on GFX was the 40mm. Well, still is. It is a absolutely pretty tiny combo for this camera system. And it, again, makes it feel smaller than it is. With the 40mm EF lens on the GFX 50S, it feels not significantly bigger than a full-frame DSLR, which is just kind of neat. And this combo with the adapter, it is thinner than the GF 50mm, which is the smallest GF lens in the lineup. So it's a pretty neat way to get a compact setup. And the 40mm also covers the GFX format very well. It's also surprisingly sharp almost all the way across the frame if you just stop down a bit. So overall, pretty cool. And you get other stuff like on the EF system as well, like the 85mm 1.2, also a lens that surprisingly covers the full sensor. And sure, these lenses are not technically superior to the GFX native glass. They don't have absolutely perfect sharpness. They don't have perfect chromatic aberration performance or suppression, but that's kind of the point, right? At least for me, getting some of the imperfectness and figuring how to actually shoot with it is part of the fun. And again, I get it. If you're using the system professionally, you may not necessarily want the imperfections or care for them. You probably want the better glass. And for that, yeah, you will probably go for the native lenses all of the time. But for people who just want to shoot for funsies, it's an interesting option. Not only that, the cost of this lens, I got a reasonable deal on it, but it wasn't like a great deal. So I paid roughly $900 pre-tax. And it's a pretty good price nowadays for a lens, for a nice lens. But it's literally I think it is the cheapest GF lens out there. And for that money, the $900, I could have bought multiple sets of this combo. And is it multiple times better than the 40mm pancake Canon with the AF adapter? I don't know. This lens, surprisingly or unsurprisingly, punches pretty hard. Obviously, corner to corner, yes, the GF lens has an advantage. But center sharpness, this is actually not bad. Wide open, mind you, which is a little bit faster than the GF lens. And is it multiple times better than this 35mm f2? I don't know. I picked this up for a pretty good steal, I think around 220 Canadian buckaroos or so. That was a good price, I will admit. And is the GF lens better than the legendary Canon 85-1.2? Again, it depends. If you want pure sharpness and technical goodness, obviously not. But if you want to try an 85mm 1.2 on medium format and you don't have a million, billion, jillion dollars, this is a pretty solid option for, at this point, around the same cost as this lens. Not with the adapter. With the Viltrox adapter, I think the 85 and the adapter might cost a little more than the GF lens. But honestly, this lens on the GFX has been so much fun. Yes, it's super heavy, and it does remind you of it. But for what it does, I really like it. And again, is it a better lens than the GF50? Depending on how you want to use it, it could be. But if you're looking for across the frame sharpness and perfectly suppressed aberrations, then probably not. But if you're like me and you just like to fool around a bit, it is a lot of fun. And that, for me, counts quite a bit. And it's why I like shooting adapted glass on GFX for the most part. Now, you might have noticed earlier on, I did mention that the native glass actually autofocuses pretty well. That's something that is harder to ignore. I was a bit taken aback just how much better the AF was using the native GF lens. So since I'd always heard that generally the system wasn't that good anyways. Now, at the time before I got the lens, I was under the impression that using my Viltrox adapter and my EF glass, that the AF was about on par. But I can now say confidently it is not. Now, the AF is not nearly as good as something like the A7 III that I use, or other full-frame mirrorless cameras, or even Micro Four Thirds cameras like the EM1 Mark II. But it's not really a slouch, especially for stills. It is perfectly adequate and honestly reasonably fast for the single-shot AF tasks. And that is something that maybe it's just the adapter that I'm using, which is the Viltrox EF GFX Pro. Maybe that is part of the reason why it's not as fast. I'm not sure, because I have heard that the adapters like from the likes of Fringer or Megadap are very, very good. But I've also heard that these adapters generally perform better on the GFX 100 series, since that has on-center phase detect points, and this 50S does not, which also likely contributes to the slowness of the EF lenses. But again, I was pleasantly surprised at the overall speed of the native glass. It was generally snappier, more accurate, and overall just a pretty nice experience. So if autofocus is something that was kind of maybe hindering you from the GF line, if you mainly do stills and if you mainly do static-ish shots or use single point AF, or are someone who's used to something like focus recompose, shooting at that kind of speed, really, the GFX system overall, the 50S or 50 series system, I think is better than people give it credit for. So yeah, it's kind of all I have to say, mostly. So just a reminder, if you're interested in looking at trying to power your GFX 50S using USB power, have a look at those little adapters down below. And this isn't an ad or anything, just want to put that out there. I paid for these with my own money. I just thought it was an interesting solution. And the links have no affiliates or anything to them. They're just the ones I could find. So feel free to shop around if you don't like the ones that I put up. But honestly, I found this to be an interesting solution and an interesting way to take advantage of USB-C power delivery standards. And I'll be looking into seeing what else I can power with this cable, because it does now open up some possibilities of powering older cameras that are difficult or unpleasant to get batteries for. So maybe we'll see more of that using these things. And just a reminder, if you do look into this, be aware that the adapter or these cables cannot magically generate a voltage that your block and or battery does not support. So if you are looking into this as a solution, have a look at your power bricks, have a look at your battery banks, and make sure they support the voltage you actually want. And make sure that if the voltage that your brick and your power banks have are higher, that you don't set it to the higher voltage you can plug in your camera, because that could probably be a bad time for your potentially quite expensive camera gear. It's something that I am probably going to have to be extra careful with. But yeah, interesting solution. And let me know whether or not you adapt camera lenses as well. I know that for me, it's been a pretty big part of my photographing journey. Otherwise, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Till next time, bye. Oh, actually, and also don't forget to do the super thanks thing if you're into that. All right, now, bye.